By 9:14 p.m., I had 68 missed calls. My son's name filled the screen, over and over. Earlier that evening, he had stood beneath crystal chandeliers at a country club I'd once dreamed of walking into beside him, and told 200 guests there had been a booking mistake with his honeymoon. There wasn't. I canceled it. Every flight, every villa, every reservation that took me months of connections to secure. And when he finally noticed the $25,000 was gone, I was sitting on a terrace in Aspen, holding a glass of champagne, watching the mountains turn gold. He said it was just a small gathering, that I wouldn't know anyone there. He was right. I didn't know the version of my son who erased his own father from the guest list. But that night, I learned something else. Sometimes the only way to teach your grown child your value is to stop paying for the illusion that they remember it. The envelope that never came. Every afternoon for 3 weeks, I checked the mailbox like a man waiting for a draft notice. Bills, insurance offers, thank you cards from corporate clients whose galas I'd orchestrated flawlessly. But never the cream-colored envelope with gold embossing. I know stationery. I built Harrington events from nothing after my wife passed. I know which paper stock wealthy families choose for engagement celebrations. The Whitmores would pick heavy cotton stock, gold foil, formal script. My son Daniel was getting engaged, and I hadn't received an invitation. First week, I assumed printer delays. Second week, guest list revisions. By the third, I stopped lying to myself. The party was in 2 days. Still nothing. I stared at my phone for 20 minutes before calling him. It rang 4 times. Hey, Dad, can I call you back? I'm in the middle of something. Of course, I said automatically. 32 years of reflex. It's just, I haven't seen an invitation for the engagement party. There was a pause. Just slightly too long. Oh, that. It's really small. Mostly Vanessa's family circle. You wouldn't enjoy it. I know you, I almost said. Instead, I swallowed it. You ever notice how fathers are expected to absorb things quietly? If you're listening from somewhere right now, tell me in the comments, have you ever swallowed something you shouldn't have? Because I did. And I shouldn't have. Instagram doesn't lie. The truth didn't come from my son. It came from Instagram. My assistant texted me that afternoon. Mr. Harrington, have you seen Caroline Whitmore's story? Caroline, daughter of longtime clients. I planned her sweet 16, her college send-off, her brother's wedding. I opened the app. There it was. Flat lay shot. Cream card. Gold foil. Daniel Harrington and Vanessa Whitmore request the honor. Black tie. 200 guests. The Whitmore Country Club. 200. And I wasn't one of them. I stared at that image longer than I'd care to admit. It wasn't an oversight. It wasn't lost mail. It was intentional. Memories flooded in like unwanted guests. Double shifts after my wife died. Driving 6 hours to visit him freshman year when he felt homesick. Building my company event by event so he'd never feel limited. And here I was, limited to scrolling someone else's invitation. I opened my banking app. Honeymoon fund. 2,500美元. Months of 12-hour days. My finger hovered over the transfer button. If I did this, there was no going back. But if I didn't, I would be telling him this was acceptable. So I pressed it. And just like that, the money moved back where it belonged. Mine. Consolations. The money was only part one. The real leverage was access. Through years of planning high-profile events, I had secured something most people couldn't. Reservations. A cliffside villa in Positano. Overwater bungalows in the Maldives as backup. First-class flights booked under professional holds. I sent 3 emails. Polite. Concise. Professional. Please release the reservation. One by one, confirmations arrived. Cancelled. I leaned back in my chair and felt something unfamiliar. Not revenge. Relief. For decades, I had measured my love in provision. What if love sometimes meant restraint? That evening, instead of returning a pair of monogrammed luggage tags I'd ordered for them, I called my travel agent. Aspen, tomorrow. First class. Just me. 24 hours later, I was seated at a terrace at the Little Nell. Mountains in front of me. Champagne in hand. Would you like a photo, sir? The server asked. Yes, I said. And when I posted it with the caption, New Beginnings, Aspen, I silenced my phone. By morning, there were 68 missed calls. 68 missed calls. I turned off airplane mode at 7:12 a.m. The phone vibrated so hard it slid across the nightstand. Missed calls: 68. 39 from Daniel. 8 from Vanessa. 5 from her mother. The rest from numbers I recognized: mutual contacts, business associates, even one from the Whitmore Club office. I didn't panic. That was the first sign something inside me had shifted. The texts told the story. 7:46 p.m. Dad, where are you? The honeymoon account is empty. 8:17 p.m. Call me immediately. 9:03 p.m. Are you seriously in Aspen? 9:32 p.m. The Positano Villa says the reservation was canceled. By midnight, confusion turned into anger. 12:17 a.m. This isn't funny. 1:45 a.m. Vanessa is in tears. And finally, at 3:22 a.m. I didn't think you'd be this selfish. Selfish. I sat up against the pillows and read that word again. For 32 years, I funded his education, his first car, his down payment assistance. One boundary, and I was selfish. If you're a father listening right now, tell me honestly, when was the last time someone called you selfish for protecting your dignity? I set the phone face down. The concierge knocked gently. Breakfast is ready on the terrace, Mr. Harrington. For once, I didn't rush to fix anything. I poured coffee, watched the mountains, and let my son sit with consequences. For the first time in his life, I didn't answer immediately, and that silence was louder than any argument we were about to have. The text that changed the tone. I didn't call him. Not that morning. Not after breakfast. Not even after the third wave of messages. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote. The hotel provided thick stationery embossed with the resort crest. I sat at the terrace table, mountain air cutting through the silence, and wrote one sentence at the top of the page. Who am I if I'm not just Daniel's father? It felt almost disloyal to ask. For decades, I had defined myself by that role. Widower, provider, the steady one, the man who never complained. But something about being erased from that guest list made the question unavoidable. My phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't open the messages. I opened my banking app again instead, not to reverse anything, but to confirm something. The $25,000 was secure. Then I drafted a single text. Not emotional, not dramatic. Measured. I'm safe. The honeymoon fund was never guaranteed. It was a gift I chose to offer. I need time to think about our relationship moving forward. We will talk when I return next week. I read it 3 times. No anger. No apology. Just clarity. I pressed send. The reply came in under 30 seconds. You're embarrassing us. That word again. Us. Not me. Not our relationship. Just optics. I stared at the snow-capped peaks in front of me and felt something harden not into bitterness, but into understanding. My son wasn't panicking about losing a vacation. He was panicking about losing status. And for the first time in his life, I wasn't going to protect him from that. That afternoon, I left my phone in the room and went hiking alone. And with every step up that mountain, I realized something simple. I had spent 32 years cushioning his falls. Maybe this one needed to hurt a little. We need to talk. Today. The peace lasted exactly 6 days. When my plane touched down back home, I turned my phone on. Daniel called immediately. I let it ring once, twice, then declined it. A text followed. We need to talk. I'm coming over tonight at 7. Not a question. A directive. For 32 years, I would have rearranged my schedule, canceled meetings, ordered his favorite takeout, braced myself to smooth things over. Instead, I typed, I'm not available tonight. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. works for me. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Fine. That single word told me everything. He wasn't used to resistance. That evening, I walked through my house differently than I ever had before. 5 bedrooms, a dining table that seated 12, a study lined with framed photos of Daniel at every stage of life, little league, prom, college graduation. When was the last time I'd added a photo of myself? I stood in the hallway and realized something unsettling. This house wasn't mine. It was a monument to fatherhood, and, if I'm honest, to over-functioning. Have you ever built your life around someone so completely that when they step away, you're left standing in a museum? The next day, at exactly 3 p.m., Daniel walked in using his key. He didn't knock. That small detail hit harder than the argument I knew was coming. "Dad," he said, jaw tight. What the hell was that? I didn't stand. I didn't raise my voice. I simply gestured toward the chair across from me. "Let's sit down." For the first time in his life, he wasn't walking into a house that revolved around him. He was walking into a conversation where I wasn't backing down. And he knew it. The word selfish. He didn't sit at first. He paced, hands on his hips, jaw clenched. The same posture he used as a teenager when he thought I was being unreasonable. "Do you have any idea what you did?" he demanded. Vanessa's parents had to explain to 200 guests that there was a booking issue with our honeymoon. "Do you know how humiliating that was?" I folded my hands on the table. "I wasn't invited to the party, Daniel." "That's not the point." "Then what is?" He exhaled sharply. "The point is, you retaliated." There it was. Retaliated. As if reclaiming my own money was an attack. "I reallocated," I corrected calmly. "There's a difference." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're being selfish." The word didn't sting the way it had in Aspen. It clarified. "Selfish," I repeated, "for not funding a honeymoon to a celebration I wasn't welcome at?" "It was Vanessa's family's event," he said quickly. "Their guest list. Their circle. You wouldn't have known anyone. I would have known my son." Silence. For just a second, his eyes flickered. Then he doubled down. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "No," I said evenly. "I'm responding proportionally for the first time in 32 years. That stopped him. And, if you're listening right now, really listening, ask yourself something. When someone finally stops overextending for you, does it feel like betrayal or balance? Daniel dragged a hand down his face. "Vanessa's parents think you're trying to embarrass us. I didn't mention your names anywhere, but people know." "Good," I said softly. He stared at me like he didn't recognize the man sitting across from him. And maybe he didn't. Because for the first time, I wasn't negotiating from guilt. I was negotiating from dignity. And that changed everything. The version of history he believed. "What I don't understand," Daniel said, finally sitting down, "is how you could do this after everything I've done for you." I blinked. "Everything you've done for me?" "Yes." His voice steadied, as if he'd rehearsed this. "I stayed close to home for college after Mom died. I took the job here instead of Chicago. I come over every Sunday for dinner, even when I have other plans. I've structured my life around making sure you're okay." For a moment I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words, but because I was absorbing the reality that this was how he saw our history, that he had sacrificed for me. I chose my tone carefully. "You went to state because they gave you a full scholarship," I said quietly. "We celebrated that together. You took the job here because it offered the highest starting salary and fastest promotion track. And Sunday dinners? I initiated those. I wanted to see you." He opened his mouth to argue, but I continued. "I never asked you to stay. I never asked you to limit yourself. I built my business to support you, not to trap you." His shoulders stiffened. "That's not fair." "No," I agreed. "It isn't." Silence settled between us again, heavier this time. The truth was uncomfortable for both of us. He wasn't malicious. He was entitled. And entitlement rarely announces itself loudly. It grows quietly fed by consistent accommodation. Have you ever given so much that someone started believing it was their due? That's what I was seeing now. Daniel leaned back in his chair, frustration giving way to something else. Confusion. "I just thought you liked being involved," he muttered. "I did," I said. "But liking something doesn't mean surrendering self-respect." He rubbed his temples. "So what now?" That question, small, uncertain, told me more than the accusations had. For the first time, he didn't know the script. And for the first time, neither did I. But I knew one thing. Whatever came next wasn't going to look like the last 32 years. The house. After Daniel left, the house felt different. Not Hampshire. Clearer. I walked slowly from room to room. The formal dining room I barely used unless he was coming over. The guest suite maintained for visits that hadn't happened in years. The garage shelf still holding his old baseball trophies. Every corner of this place had been arranged around him. I stood in the foyer and said something out loud I hadn't admitted before. This is too much house for one man. But that wasn't the real truth. The real truth was this. It was too much identity built around someone who no longer needed it. The next morning, I called a realtor. "Daniel doesn't know yet," I told her. "But I'd like to discuss listing." She arrived that afternoon, professional, efficient, complimentary about the property value. 5 bedrooms, Prime neighborhood, excellent market timing. Within 48 hours, a for sale sign stood in my yard. Daniel called that evening. You're selling the house? Yes, but that's my childhood. No, I corrected gently. It was. He was quiet. I always assumed you'd stay. I always assumed I'd be invited. That landed. You ever notice how assumptions are just silent contracts no one agreed to? He exhaled slowly. Where will you go? Somewhere smaller. Downtown, maybe. Closer to the arts district. The arts district? He repeated, as if I'd announced I was joining a motorcycle club. I almost smiled. Yes. There was a long pause. You've really changed. No, I said evenly. I've really started, and as I hung up, I realized something important. Selling the house wasn't about punishment. It was about alignment. If I was serious about building a life that didn't revolve around waiting for invitations, then the setting had to change too. The sign in the yard wasn't just selling square footage. It was announcing a shift, and shifts make people uncomfortable, especially the ones who benefited from the old arrangement. Her visit, 3 days after the sign went up, a silver Mercedes pulled into my driveway. Vanessa's mother stepped out. Margaret Whitmore moved like someone accustomed to being noticed. Precise posture, controlled smile, tailored perfection. She had never visited my home before, not once in 2 years of her daughter dating my son. Mr. Harrington, she greeted smoothly when I opened the door. I hope I'm not intruding. You are, I said calmly. But you're welcome to come in. That caught her off guard. We sat in the living room, a space she'd probably already mentally assessed as comfortable but modest. I'll be direct, she began. Daniel informed us about the honeymoon situation. I'm sure he did. Margaret folded her hands neatly. This escalation is unnecessary. The engagement party had limited seating. 200 guests, I replied. That's generous limitation? Her smile tightened slightly. We prioritized our family circle and professional relationships. And Caroline Whitmore? I asked evenly. Her family are my clients. I've known her since she was 16. Margaret didn't blink. Social positioning is delicate. There it was. Translation. You weren't useful in that room. I understand positioning, I said quietly. I built my career on it. What I don't understand is expecting financial contributions from someone you chose not to position. Her eyes sharpened. The honeymoon was assumed. By whom? Silence. Margaret shifted strategies. The young couple is under pressure now. Adjusting plans last minute reflects poorly. I wasn't concerned about appearances when I was excluded. You're being emotional. No, I corrected softly. I'm being consistent. She studied me, recalibrating. What would it take to restore things to the original arrangement? Nothing. That answer came easily. Some arrangements don't return to their original form, I said. Daniel is 32, successful, marrying into wealth. He doesn't need his father funding a luxury honeymoon. This will strain relationships. Only the ones that depended on my wallet. That landed. Margaret rose. You've changed, Mr. Harrington. Yes, I agreed. And that seems to be unsettling people who preferred the previous version. When she left, I didn't feel anger. I felt confirmation. I had not imagined the hierarchy. I had simply stepped out of it. And once you step out of a system built on quiet compliance, the system reacts. But here's what I realized sitting alone afterward. I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to reset. And resets rarely feel comfortable for anyone involved, especially when money used to smooth everything over. The offer. The house sold in 4 days. Full asking price. A young couple expecting their first child walked through during the open house and whispered to each other in the kitchen like it was already theirs. I watched from the hallway and felt something unexpected. Not loss. Relief. When I told Daniel, he was quiet longer than usual. So that's it? He asked. You're really leaving? I'm moving, I corrected. Not disappearing. He exhaled slowly. It just feels like everything's changing at once. It is, I said. That doesn't mean it's falling apart. There's a difference between destruction and renovation. Sometimes they look identical from the outside. A week later, I signed papers on a 2-bedroom condominium downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Walking distance to galleries, bookstores, independent coffee shops I'd driven past for years but never entered. The first night there, surrounded by unopened boxes, I poured myself a drink and stood at the window overlooking the city lights. No framed childhood photos dominating the walls. No oversized dining table waiting for guests who rarely came. Just space. and possibility. That's when my phone rang. Daniel. I let it ring twice before answering, not out of strategy, but because I was learning not to respond automatically. Dad, he said, voice lower than usual. Can we have dinner? That surprised me. Dinner? Just us. No confrontation. No defensiveness. I leaned against the counter. When? Friday? There was something different in his tone. Not anger. Not entitlement. Uncertainty. I'll cook, I said finally. 7 o'clock. Okay. He hesitated before adding, I didn't realize how much you did. That wasn't an apology, but it was the first crack in the armor. After I hung up, I walked through my half-furnished condo and imagined a dining table placed near the window. Smaller. Intentional. Not built for performance, built for conversation. If you're listening to this and you've ever had to redraw boundaries with someone you love, you know this part is the hardest. Not the confrontation, the rebuilding. Because you don't know if the other person is growing or just adjusting temporarily. Friday would tell me, and for the first time in months, I wasn't anxious. I was curious. That felt like progress. The dinner. I spent more time choosing what to wear than I had for any event in years. Not to impress him, but to reflect the man I was becoming. Dark jeans, crisp navy shirt, no tie, no corporate event planner armor. Just me. Daniel arrived at Seta du P. The building concierge called up first. That small formality mattered. He couldn't just walk in anymore. When I opened the door, he paused. This is different. Come in. The condo was modern, clean lines, abstract art I'd purchased on impulse. A smaller dining table positioned near the window overlooking the skyline. No family gallery wall? He asked lightly. I kept a few in the guest room. He nodded slowly, taking in the shift. Over dinner, grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, a bottle of red. He brought conversation started cautiously. Work updates, wedding planning details, neutral territory. Then he set his fork down. I owe you an apology. That wasn't something Daniel said easily. For the engagement party, he continued. You should have been invited. I should have pushed back. I let the silence breathe before responding. Thank you. He nodded once, then added, I didn't realize how much I assumed. Assumed what? That you'd always just handle things. Financially, logistically, emotionally. Honesty, unpolished, uncomfortable. It meant more than a dramatic apology would have. I handled things because I chose to, I said. But choice and obligation aren't the same. He leaned back. When you posted that photo in Aspen, it hit me. You looked lighter. I almost laughed. That's because I wasn't carrying everyone. He looked down at his glass. I don't want us to become distant. Distance isn't the goal, I replied. Balance is. If you're still here listening, let me ask you something. Have you ever confused closeness with dependence? Because that's what we were untangling. Daniel reached into his jacket and slid a small box across the table. Inside was a leather-bound journal. My initials embossed on the cover. For your trips, he said quietly. Vanessa picked it out. That detail mattered. They had talked about me, considered me. Not as a sponsor, as a person. That night didn't fix everything, but it changed the direction. And direction is everything. The invitation. 3 months passed quietly. No drama, no financial expectations, no passive-aggressive texts. Just steady, cautious recalibration. The wedding invitation arrived at my office by courier. Heavy cardstock. Elegant script. I recognized the formatting immediately. It was the kind of precision I used to execute for my own clients. I opened it carefully. Daniel Harrington and Vanessa Whitmore request the honor. Formal, traditional. But tucked behind the printed card was a handwritten note. Dad, I hope you'll be there. I can't imagine the day without you. Simple. No theatrics. Just that. I sat back in my chair longer than necessary. The engagement party had excluded me. The wedding invited me. That wasn't a small shift. My assistant knocked lightly before entering. Everything okay? Yes, I said honestly. Better than okay. I ran my thumb across the edge of the card. +1 included, she observed. I hadn't even noticed. +1. Not Dad. Not Mr. Harrington. Just space for my life. And that mattered more than he realized. Later that evening I met Daniel for coffee. You got it? He asked, trying not to sound anxious. I did. And I'll be there. Relief softened his shoulders immediately. There's something else, he added. Vanessa and I decided we're paying for the honeymoon ourselves. That caught me off guard. We scaled it back, he continued. Portugal. Nothing extravagant. Just ours. I nodded slowly. That's a good foundation. He looked at me carefully. You're not angry anymore, are you? No, I said truthfully. I'm clear. There's a difference. Anger burns hot and fades fast. Clarity stays. Before we parted, he hesitated. We'd like you to do a reading during the ceremony. That one surprised me. Are you sure? Yes, he said firmly. You've always believed in growth. That fits. Growth. Not provision. Not funding. Growth. As I walked back to my car, invitation in hand, I realized something subtle but powerful. He wasn't inviting the old version of me. He was inviting the man I had become. And that meant this wasn't a return to how things were. It was a step toward something new. If you've ever had a relationship rebuilt instead of repaired, you know how rare that is. The wedding wouldn't be about proving anything. It would be about showing up, on my terms. And that changed everything. The guest I didn't expect. 3 weeks before the wedding, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to an art gallery opening. Not for networking, not to scout venues, not to manage logistics, just because I wanted to. Downtown Seattle has a converted warehouse space that rotates contemporary exhibits. That night featured architectural photography, reclaimed industrial buildings, transformed into living spaces. The artist stood near a series depicting abandoned factories reborn into light-filled lofts. His name was Robert Castellano, early 60s. Silver at the temples, tailored blazer that fit without trying too hard. You're studying that one like you're measuring it, he said when he noticed me lingering. I spent 20 years planning events in spaces like this, I replied. I know what transformation costs. He smiled. And is it worth it? Depends on what you're transforming for. We ended up talking for 2 hours. About design. About identity. About second chapters. He had divorced 10 years earlier. Rebuilt his life slowly, without spectacle. I've learned, he said at one point, swirling his wine thoughtfully, that reinvention isn't dramatic. It's deliberate. That line stayed with me. Over the next few weeks, we had dinner, coffee, a long walk along the waterfront. There was no urgency, no performance. Just two men who had outgrown older versions of themselves. One evening, sitting across from him at my condo, I asked a question that surprised even me. Would you consider coming to my son's wedding? He didn't answer immediately. That's significant, he said carefully. Family events carry weight. I know, I replied. Which is exactly why I'm asking. He studied me for a moment. Are you inviting me because you want support, or because you want me there? I appreciated that question. Both, I admitted. He nodded once. Then I'd be honored. There it was. Not a dramatic romance. Not a rebound. Just companionship rooted in mutual respect. When I told Daniel I'd be bringing someone, he hesitated only briefly. Does Vanessa know? He asked. Yes. And? She suggested I bring whoever makes me happy. He smiled at that. Growth doesn't announce itself loudly. Sometimes it shows up in small allowances. And this was one of them. If you're still listening, here's something worth considering. The moment you stop shrinking to fit someone else's expectations, you create space for new connections. The wedding wasn't just about my son anymore. It was about walking into that room fully myself. And not alone. The rehearsal dinner. The night before the wedding, the Whitmores hosted a rehearsal dinner at their lake house. Smaller guest list. Controlled environment. Margaret greeted Robert with a measured smile. Mr. Castellano, I've heard of your work. I hope only good things, he replied smoothly. I watched the exchange carefully. No territorial tension. No subtle dismissal. Progress. During dinner, Daniel stood to thank everyone for coming. When he reached my name, he paused. And my father, he said, voice steady, who taught me that integrity matters more than appearances. That wasn't scripted. I felt it. Later, as guests drifted toward the fire pit, Daniel joined me by the water. Tomorrow won't be perfect, he admitted. It doesn't have to be, I said. He looked at Robert across the lawn, laughing with Vanessa's cousins. I'm glad you're not alone. I'm not, I replied. For the first time in a long while, neither was he. The ceremony. The garden ceremony was immaculate. White chairs in perfect rows. Floral arch heavy with roses. I took my seat beside Robert, third row close enough to matter. When Daniel locked eyes with me at the altar, something unspoken passed between us. Acknowledgement. When it was my turn to read, I stepped forward without hesitation. The passage was about growth, how love must expand rather than confine. My voice didn't waver. I wasn't reading as a wounded father. I was reading as a man who had grown. Afterward, Daniel squeezed my hand briefly. "Thank you," he whispered. "Not for the money, not for the past, for showing up," and that distinction meant everything. The conversation with Margaret. During cocktail hour, Margaret approached me quietly. "You handled yourself well," she said. "So did you," I replied. She studied me for a moment. "I miscalculated earlier this year." "That happens," I said evenly. "I've spent decades managing perception," she admitted. "Your response forced me to reconsider what actually matters." That was as close to an apology as I'd ever hear from her. "I wasn't trying to challenge you," I said. "I was protecting myself." She nodded slowly. Sometimes that's the same thing. When she walked away, I didn't feel victory. I felt resolution. Systems shift when someone refuses to stay in their assigned place. And tonight, I wasn't in mine anymore. The dance. After the father-daughter waltz, the bandleader called. "And now, the groom and his father." Daniel extended his hand. "Ready?" "I've been ready," I said. We moved through the slow rhythm, smoothly, not perfect, but comfortable. "You've changed," he murmured. "I had to." He nodded. "I'm learning." That was enough. Applause rose when the music ended, but it sounded distant. The moment wasn't about spectacle. It was about balance. As I returned to the table, Robert smiled. "Not bad," he said. "Don't get competitive," I warned. Later, when the formalities faded and Sinatra filled the room, Robert dragged me onto the floor. No choreography, no expectations, just movement. For the first time at one of my son's milestone events, I wasn't managing anything. I was participating. After the wedding, 2 weeks later, Daniel called from Portugal. "We scaled it back," he said, laughing. "No cliffside villa, just a small place near the water. Are you happy?" "Yes," he answered without hesitation. Vanessa came on the line. "Thank you for coming," she said. "And for everything." The pause after that word was honest. When the call ended, I didn't feel the old urge to advise or fix. They were building something themselves. That was the point. Later that evening, Robert and I walked along the waterfront. "Do you regret any of it?" he asked. "No," I said. "Not even the missed calls." Because those 68 missed calls weren't about revenge. They were about recalibration. And sometimes relationships need recalibration more than reconciliation. 8 months later, 8 months after Aspen, I stood on another terrace, this time in New Zealand. Emerald water below. Wind sharp and clean. My phone buzzed. "Proud of you, Dad." A photo followed my book displayed in a bookstore window. I stared at it longer than necessary. From uninvited father to author of his own chapter. Robert slipped his hand into mine. "Worth it?" he asked. "Yes," I said. Because reclaiming yourself isn't about cutting people off. It's about standing tall enough that the right ones adjust. If you've listened this far, maybe there's something in your life you've been absorbing quietly. Maybe there's a boundary you've postponed. Here's what I learned. Dignity isn't loud. It's consistent. And sometimes the most loving thing a father can do is stop funding the version of himself that no longer fits. The journey continues. And this time I'm walking it on purpose.